Welcome to this session on rebalancing the economy, growing counties. We are delighted to welcome this morning Sadie Morgan, Kevin Bentley and Simon Ridley to talk about growth funding over the next few years. Due to changes with the programme, Sadie will need to leave us at about 12, so I'm going to hand over to her first, and Sadie will also take questions if we have time, hopefully we will, before we move on to our other speakers. So Sadie is a commissioner at the National Infrastructure Commission, and as infrastructure providers, counties are key to delivering the growth this country needs. So we're delighted to welcome Sadie this morning. Sadie.
Well, good morning, and thank you very much for inviting me to come to speak to you. This is an exciting time for local government. In many areas of public service and delivering economic growth, it is councils that are now in the driving seat, navigating a route to local economic growth and building prosperous communities that work for everybody. County councils, like yourselves, are in a unique position to lead the future shape of England's towns and cities in a way that you haven't been able to before. And it's not just lead, but also collaborate across boundaries to create more ambitious, transformative visions for communities that not only deliver prosperity and growth, but also become vibrant places where people actually want to live and work. On the 10th of July, the National Infrastructure Commission published the National Infrastructure Assessment, the first of its kind for this country. It covers a range of sectors and looks as far ahead as 3 decades to identify and make recommendations for meeting the UK's infrastructure needs. It recommends how the country gets the most out of the existing infrastructure we have and how we can be best placed to make the right choices for new infrastructure to ensure continued prosperity, competitiveness, and general well-being in the face of significant challenges, such as those from climate change and population growth. Our assessment is clear that cities are key drivers of local economic growth. They are crucial to the UK's success, with more than half of the population living or working in cities, and that population is growing. People in the UK cities want to be able to live there and be able to reach their jobs and participate in leisure activities easily. In many cases, people also need to be able to commute from surrounding areas outside our cities. But increasingly expensive housing and congestion on local transport networks are creating constraints that are holding back potential growth and access to new jobs. And that is why we've recommended cities should be devolved powers and £43 billion worth of funding on top of current spending levels between now and 2040 to solve a trilemma of which you are, I'm sure, very familiar. The complex puzzle of how to integrate effective transport, employment, and housing. Despite what you may have thought up until now, the assessment's recommendations are not just targeted at metro mayors. We recognise that many of you are not competing with cities directly and that county councils have particular infrastructure challenges. But I want to stress that our recommendations are relevant both to city leaders and county councils alike. In the assessment, the recommendations are targeted at 45 largest cities in England, including a diverse group of medium and small cities, many of which are affected by serious transport congestion. We are looking to further engage with a number of them as part of our ongoing cities work. Of these, 22 are centred on unitary authorities, and 13 are centred on district authority in county council areas. We believe strongly that all the UK cities need bigger and longer-term devolved budgets and the opportunity to bid for major projects in order to deal with local and regional challenges, and that they are best placed to resolve that they are best placed to resolve, particularly on urban transport. That in turn will help those who face traffic jams and delays at least twice daily as they travel in and out of a particular city to get to and from work. But we are not just saying that funding increases are needed in cities. We also believe that government can afford an increase of 25% in funding for local transport outside of cities by the mid-2030s. Importantly, we can't treat transport as a challenge in isolation. We must deal with and plan for it alongside job creation and new homes, which together will help deliver more attractive communities in which to work and live. Livable communities depend on many other factors too. Alongside transport and housing, creating a low-carbon economy is essential to address climate change and the growing threat from air pollution, and replacing petrol and diesel vehicles on our roads with electric vehicles is a crucial element to achieve that. Doing so will require truly national EV charging network, which is why the National Infrastructure Assessment calls on government to pay for a network of rapid charging points, starting with rural and remote areas first, where the market is unlikely to help in the short term. Digital connectivity, too, is increasingly crucial to everybody's lives. Whether we live in a town, city, or village, demand for data from families and businesses alike will continue to grow, so we will need quality broadband right across the country. Yet at the moment, only 4% of households can access it. That is why in the assessment we have called for full fibre broadband rollout across the country by 2033, starting with a publicly funded rollout to rural and hard-to-reach areas. So whether it's transport, housing, digital connectivity, or utilities for housing, county and unitary councils have a vital enabling role to play, ensuring infrastructure is planned and delivered in the most effective way, particularly with housing developments that cross district boundaries. But we know there are multiple barriers that councils face. Take one, for example, the siloed planning and delivery of utilities to supply new developments. We found 3 issues that need addressing. Firstly, the lack of regulatory incentive for utility companies to increase capacity ahead of new developments, which means these costs are then passed on to the house builders. Poor communications between the diverse range of organisations involved in planning, design and delivery of utilities, and the lack of any mechanism to improve coordination between housing and infrastructure for small-scale developments. These are challenges I'm sure you're all familiar with, and the Commission will be conducting more analysis on the role of utilities in the delivery of housing in the coming months. But we are also clear that building thriving local communities is not simply about access to new funds or resolving issues with governance and coordination between different levels of local government and infrastructure providers. Infrastructure is much more than nuts and bolts, piping and wiring, spans and tunnelling. I am passionate that leaders of all levels and local stakeholders are also champions of well-designed infrastructure and communities. Good design is the surest way that I know to get the best value out of any new investment going into communities and any new housing developments in order to deliver the best outcomes for your residents. Embedding good design, however, isn't just about a bridge, a flood defence or a bus stop that is pleasing to the eye or fits within the local environment. It is about projects that save money over the long term, money that can be reinvested in your communities. It is about projects that are resilient over the long term, reducing maintenance and replacement costs that swallow up your already stretched budgets. And it's about projects that reduce risks to and protect the local environment. Good design means following the footsteps of and learning the lessons from the great Victorian urban planners and the visionaries behind the 20th century garden cities movement. It means thinking about how great infrastructure can truly create and shape a town, a city, or even a whole county in the way that makes people feel proud to live and work there. That was a central tenet of our report of the Oxford-Cambridge Growth Arc, to which the government has just published its official response. The Arc is a part of the country that contributes £90 billion to the economy, but its infrastructure network is overloaded. Travel across the Arc from Oxford to Cambridge is often difficult. It has a housing market that prices local residents out. These issues, among others, will increasingly restrict the ability of firms and universities to attract the brightest and best, and in turn damage the area's economic competitiveness, both nationally and on an international stage. Our vision for the Growth Arc includes support for an east-west rail link, a new Oxford to Cambridge expressway, and an aim to deliver 1 million new homes across the area between now and 2050. But it also highlights the importance of councils looking beyond their borders and working together to create new communities by solving the puzzle of increasing the supply of homes, opening up employment opportunities, and improving transport links. The government's budget response included welcome initiatives to support the ARC, such as the appointment of a ministerial champion, and crucially, allowing for pooling between the authorities of Section 106 contributions from developers. But these measures in and of themselves are insufficient to allow these councils and their developer partners to deliver the scale of new housing and the integrated infrastructure needed to ensure that new homes become livable, desirable communities. It is clear-sighted leadership from government and councils involved that is needed to fully develop the transformation needed. But that will be a conundrum that you face as councils, wherever you are in the country. Infrastructure projects and efforts to improve economic growth at this scale do not always fit conveniently within local borders. Whether it's the Growth Arc or anywhere else in the country, it is to this increasingly collaborative approach that councils such as yourself and the wider county councils network will be turning. One of the motivations behind setting up the National Infrastructure Commission was to address weaknesses in the decision-making process around infrastructure by taking politics out of these situations as far as is possible. Better decisions can and need to be taken. As councils, you will be out there championing well-designed projects that both deliver new infrastructure and transform whole communities, while also getting the biggest bang for your investment buck. Councils are in the best position to be problem solvers and visionaries for their areas. The ideas of the National Infrastructure Assessment could give you the means to do that better, subject, of course, to their approval by government. But if these recommendations are to become a reality, we need to support all of you to help make it happen. That means making the case clearly and regularly to media, ministers and MPs from across the political spectrum that we need investment in our local infrastructure and that our assessment offers a strategy to achieve that in a way that will benefit communities both north and south. Alongside such opportunities, as the development of local industrial strategies and the creation of a new UK shared prosperity fund, the recommendations in the National Infrastructure Assessment would put more power in your hands to shape your communities, improve local transport connections, and ensure the cities within your boundaries and those outside have every possible opportunity to thrive and prosper for the long term, for long into the future. This is an exciting opportunity for local government, and I hope that by working together, we can secure the best outcome for communities up and down the country. Thank you.
I think we have got a few minutes if anybody does have any questions before Sadie has to dash off. So do we have a mic somewhere? Just coming down, there's a couple just in the middle, and we'll just take both of them. Thank you. As ever, if you just introduce yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much. John Chilver, Buckinghamshire County Council. The Highways England has recently announced the preferred corridor route for the Oxford to Cambridge Expressway, which you referred to. This decision was taken with no environmental impact assessment, no public consultation, and no meaningful engagement with the local authorities involved. So what happened to the localism agenda, and can we have more meaningful engagement with elected authorities when major infrastructure decisions are taken in the future?
Thank you. Cornelius?
Yeah, I've travelled up here from Cornwall, and it's very exciting to hear about express links between Cambridge and Oxford, two areas I didn't realise were suffering from a crisis of underinvestment. Getting back home today may be problematic. If the tide is high and the wind is in the wrong direction, the rail link at Dawlish may well be out of action again, and Plymouth and Cornwall will essentially be cut off. So we do feel that some of what you're saying, which is very interesting, is focus on the southeast again, whereas really fundamental links to the southwest or across the Pennines or wherever don't seem to be any further forward than they were, last year, 5 years ago, whenever. And the specific thing about the rail link to the southwest is, a subject of great political concern in Devon and Cornwall, I think it's fair to say.
Thank you. Do we have any others? If not, Sadie, do you want to come back on those?
Yeah, I'm not sure they were questions rather than just kind of. The National Infrastructure Commission is here to look at national infrastructure as opposed just to the southeast, and we've done a number of reports, not just the Oxford Milton Keynes Cambridge corridor, but transport for the north and various and our cities. Programme work that will be coming up will be taking specific areas from the southwest and looking at how we can assist those areas to make sure that they put a really clear economic case forward for strategic long-term infrastructure that strategic long-term infrastructure needs. I mean, I think the point that we've been making is that local authorities know best. And you know what is needed in your areas, and to have the opportunity to have proper long-term strategic thinking and planning, you need devolved budgets in order to do that. So, I think the case that we put forward within the National Infrastructure Assessment is trying to say, in order that we have a national infrastructure that works for everybody, not just in the south, not just in the north, but in the southwest, we need to make sure that you have the opportunity and skills to put forward long-term planning, long-term strategic visions that will allow not only investment but your particular areas to grow and be sustainable.
Okay. Yep. Thank you very much. I think we've just about stuck to time, so hopefully you're okay. If the trains are behaving, which I'm told they are.
Nothing to do with me.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Sadie, and thanks for coming along. Thank you. So, as we head towards the next spending review, delivering growth that reaches all corners of the country will be vital. Previous CCN work with Oxford Economics and more recently on social mobility set out the challenges we face in ensuring all our communities are able to grow. Clearly, the next year will see significant changes in the economic growth environment. We've seen recent announcements giving new focus to towns and high streets, which are welcome. So we're delighted to welcome Simon Ridley to discuss what role counties can play, hang on, in driving growth. But first, first we will hear from Kevin Bentley, who, as we know, chairs various very important groups such as the LGA Brexit Taskforce, to discuss the links between Brexit and growth, and particularly the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. This time we'll hear from Kevin, then we'll hear from Simon, and then we'll take questions together.
Simon, thank you. I thought you were going to say, here's Kev, that's why I got up here. So anyway, first of all, I just need to apologise about my voice. I'm just getting over a cold, and I'm losing parts of my voice, which Paul Carter will tell you proves there really is a God. And also, I'm very conscious standing here I'm about the only person left in the country with Brexit still in their title, which, of course, could change depending on how this goes this afternoon. When I go anywhere, literally when I go anywhere, certainly in the local government family, people rush up to me, not asking how I am, because clearly not well, but don't worry, and say, how's Brexit going? Well, the honest answer is, it's on course. Trouble is, no one knows what the course is, and people have got different views on that. What I will tell you is this, and all this stuff you are seeing and feeling with your members of Parliament and the public is not the stuff we're doing at the LGA Task Force. It is a task force, as you know, cross-party, and people of no party whatsoever. And I have to say I'm very proud of them, because all this stuff you are seeing, feeling and hearing does not take place. Everything, you don't really hear much about what we're doing, because what we do actually affects millions of people's lives. But it's not very interesting to the media. Actually, I'm quite pleased. I don't really want them trailing around getting in the way when we've got to get on with this stuff. But everything we do directly affects the public. And I have to say, our own trade journals have been terrific at covering what we're doing. So you will hear a bit of it from that point of view. But you're not getting any traction on it. And actually last week, when all this melee was going on, I walked through College Green, or attempted to. I have to walk around it now because it's like a tented community there. And I heard all these people pontificating and giving lots of views, while I and colleagues, as councillors, walked into our buildings to have meetings to discuss the very things that directly affects millions of people's lives. And I suddenly was struck by the thought, thank goodness for councillors and how we behaved. Because actually, if we behaved like some members of Parliament, this country would grind to a halt right now. So well done you, and well done the people who sit on the task force. Now, we've had some really good successes. You will have known, because I've said it before, but it's very important, that the structural funds, which were at one stage looking a bit shaky and coming to an end on exit day, which is March 29th, as you know, next year, the government guaranteed they would fund those. Deal or no deal would be funded, which is critically important. The LGA councillors did that. We had a big win as well recently, which was around EU nationals. Now, at one stage, it looked like EU nationals may not be able to stand in the forthcoming local elections, or indeed be able to vote. And as well as a democratic view about that, there's also a resourcing view. As you know, many councils have been, in fact, all district and unitary councils have been going out to get people re-registering on the electoral register. And they've had to go back and tell people that they couldn't vote, that would be a huge resource. They'd also have to put people on polling stations to physically perhaps prevent people from voting. Who'd want that photograph in the papers? And we made that point. We, as councillors, made that point. And Monday last week, the government wrote to me and confirmed that all EU nationals can stand in 2019 and 2020. And obviously, beyond transition, we'll have that conversation and make that happen. I was being told at one stage, well, we've got to negotiate with the other 27 states, and I was quite clear, I don't care about that. I care about the people in this country and the democracy. And we've won that, which is good. Now, there are other battles, there are other debates we're having with the government. I have to pay great tribute to our Secretary of State, because he has been brilliant at this, and he really has gone into bat for us with various departments. When we have our special delivery board, as it's called, James gets in other top civil servants and ministers who will hear directly from us, and as a result, the government is changing its focus on many of these things. So you won't necessarily read all that in the great detail of the withdrawal bill, but absolutely that work is going on. And for your councils and for your members and for your public, And that work is important. So trading standards, food labelling, food hygiene, all these things that go on a day-to-day basis, not seen by people, not really felt by people, but it's critically important. We're getting clarification on what that means. But the really big issue now is the UK Prosperity Fund, what we used to call the Brexit dividend. Where does the money go when we're not paying it to Europe? So we've been very clear with ministerial colleagues that, and they have announced that they're going to have a consultation. I was told in the autumn, but in government terms, that's anytime between September and January. So we're expecting that to happen fairly soon. I was, again, and my colleagues, very clear, when we're going to consult, to whom are we consulting with? And the prime consultees have to be local government. Simply, the vast majorities of current EU directives and the vast majority of EU structural funds are administered and delivered by local government, not national government, local government. Therefore, we have to be key consultees in anything that goes on. And that will happen. Certainly, James has agreed that will happen. And it's important when that happens that you do take part. There have been some phone calls with some, I think, county leaders, particularly, and unitary leaders around this, just to test the water. If you're invited, please take part. When the consultation comes out, please take part. Because it is critically important that we have the money flowing in to our councils, particularly our county councils, for a strategic role when it comes to economic growth. There is a conversation going on about the vast bulk of the UK Prosperity Fund going in and delivered through the LEPs. Well, that's okay, but the LEPs aren't totally democratic when it comes to deciding where public money is spent. So while that is important, and we will play a role as county and upper tier authorities in those LEPs, it is also important when it comes to economic growth and major infrastructure schemes that is discussed at the county level with our district colleagues, of course, but actually at the county level where you can take that greater holistic view of what's going on in an area. Now, Brexit, whatever your view on Brexit, and again, in our task force, we don't discuss the rights and wrongs. As we understand it, we are leaving on March the 29th, and that's what we aim for. There are opportunities. And one of the big opportunities is around devolution. We talk about devolution. I've talked about devolution ever since I've been a councillor, which is getting on for 20 years. And I always meet shadow secretaries of state who say we're going to devolve this, and then they get into power and they don't. So this is a real opportunity for devolution. And I've had this conversation again with James and other ministers, with my task force colleagues as well, to say this is the moment you really can start to devolve things. Skills particularly, where one size does not fit all, where the people who know what skills are required in their communities are the businesses and the local councils. They are the ones that deliver. You want us to deliver economic growth. We can do it if you give us the freedoms to do it. If it's all centralised, when it comes to funding and completely unaccountable to the public and to everybody else, we have no idea. You will know in your own counties that there are companies operating, delivering apprenticeships and other work that you know nothing about and you have no access to. That has got to change. So this is a real opportunity to devolve. A real opportunity to devolve on tax-raising powers as well. Give us the freedoms. We know our communities. We know what they want. We know what they demand. We know how to pay for it if you let us get on with it. So we are now having that very strong devolution debate. And you heard James yesterday. He is true to his word and is exactly the same on the stage as he is with me in those meetings. He believes in it too and he wants it to happen. We just have to keep persuading all of the Cabinet that we need to have this devolution to take place on a number of things. You must trust local politicians. The public trust us more than national politicians, so you as national politicians must follow your electorate and put your faith and trust in us. We can deliver. So in terms of rebalancing the economy, that to me, and growing our counties, that to me is around devolution. That is around making sure proportionately that we get a share of the Brexit dividend, the UK Prosperity Fund. And I will, and my colleagues will, continue every month and every day left before we leave the EU to continually battle for you. And when we're in that transition period, we will continue to battle for local government. This Brexit is all about real people, real jobs, real families, real welfare. The only people elected that deliver for those on a daily basis is you, and thank you for doing it.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Now we'll hear from Simon.
Good afternoon. It's great to be here. As you all know growth in county councils is absolutely critical to growth across the nation. About 2/5 of England's GVA takes place in counties, and about half of the country's employment is also in the places that you govern and run. And what I'm going to do today is just canter quite quickly through what we're doing in government with county councils and across the country with various stakeholders and partners to support local growth. And I'm going to talk about work we're doing around economic strategies and economic plans. I'm going to talk about the institutions that we are working with and think are important, how we build capability across the country, and then thirdly about resources. So our approach is underpinned by the industrial strategy that was published very nearly exactly a year ago. And a crucial part of that was the final section, talking about place, talking about how do we understand different local markets, different local economies, and make sure we're supporting them differentially. And since then, we've been working in a number of places to develop local industrial strategies. And local industrial strategies are going to be a critical part of how the government works with counties, with local places to support growth. We've been working with trailblazers in a number of areas for a while. Recently, in the summer, announced a second wave of places, and in October published a policy prospectus to give everyone across the country a sense of what we want local industrial strategies to be. And what we're seeing is a great deal of innovation locally and a great deal of engagement. These are actually things that are bringing together departments in Whitehall to have economic discussions with places, as well as we're seeing bringing places together to think about their overall strategic economic opportunities. And in terms of places we're working closely with, either as trailblazers or in this second phase, we're seeing really interesting work being done in the southwest in terms of the economy, thinking spatially about the differences between the coastal economy on the south coast, some of the opportunities around nuclear on the north coast, and binding in key transport routes and key towns between. We're working very closely with Leicester and Leicestershire, the opportunities from space, the opportunities from a really world-class sports hub around Leicestershire. And one of the challenges and one of the things we really want to see in local industrial strategies is that when we read one, we know the place that it's about. They're not all saying similar versions of what they can do with the economy, but are really bound in the labour market there, really bound in the sectors that are strongest in those places. And we're working closely with other organisations nationally, like the What Works Centre, to support places to develop the sort of evidence base about sector productivity, labour market that can start to really underpin those strategies. But we're also looking at broader collaborative strategies at a different level of economic geography. So the work that we've been doing for a long time across the north as part of the Northern Powerhouse, the work that we're doing that the Secretary of State is championing for the Midlands Engine, and then other kind of key collaborative areas like Oxford, Milton Keynes, Cambridge, which Sadie talked about, and a more recent report for the Thames Estuary. And these are critical to think at this level, to think about the collaborative between local authorities, between LEP areas, particularly when we're thinking about major national infrastructure investment, which is crucial in terms of how towns and cities and broader areas connect. And you'll have seen in the budget, we'll be refreshing strategies around the Northern Powerhouse and Midlands Engine in the run-in to the spending review, so that crucial decisions about Northern Powerhouse Rail and other such like national investments are taken in the context of that broader economic strategic thinking. Secondly, in order to support the development of strategies, in order to ensure that as they are developed, they can be implemented, we're looking at institutions around local growth and how we support and work with local institutions. Now, local enterprise partnerships are a critical part of that. The government published Local Enterprise Partnership Review in the summer, and that recognised the need to strengthen local enterprise partnerships, strengthen the way they work, strengthen the capacity and capability that they have. We're implementing a wide range of changes around governance and assurance, and will be publishing before the end of the year the assurance frameworks, and actually they're bringing together different assurance frameworks. We're also looking at the boundaries of LEPs and dealing with overlaps and making sure we have the most clarity possible about the area in which they are working. We're working closely with the Local Enterprise Partnership Network and indeed the LGA to think about how we can support leadership in LEPs and the strength of capability that the organisations have to do the crucial work that they are expected to do in government. So local enterprise partnerships will continue to be a crucial set of organisations for how we think about local growth, how we think about local economies. We also have a number of mayoral combined authorities in places following the devolution deals that have been done since 2015. We continue across government to work very closely with the mayoral combined authorities that are set up, that have mayors in place. Also with areas of the country which are still bringing forward those governance models, particularly in the northeast. And again, some of the same issues about how do we support capacity, how do we think about their economic strategies with them, and help to have a single conversation between the different departments concerned with growth in Whitehall and places around the country. We're also looking at specific, very place-focused delivery mechanisms where it makes sense, where there is a local desire to do something differently, where the opportunity is there. And an example from the budget is the Chancellor gave a small amount of money to the department to work around Towton in the East Midlands, a crucial opportunity to maximise growth from a high-speed 2 station, critical to how transport in the Midlands engine can work. How do we make sure we've got the right collaborative delivery capacity between public, private sector, government, local to do that, and looking at what sort of delivery models might be appropriate there. Which brings me on to resources. Clearly local growth has been underpinned by a large number of funding streams. Many would say, I would certainly say, too many separate funding streams over time, and I think there's a really important opportunity in the work we're doing now and looking in towards the UK Shared Prosperity Fund about how can we bring more funding together. There'll always be different funding streams, but can we be more consistent and coherent about how we bring things together? The Local Growth Fund was an attempt at doing some of this over the last 5 years, and has brought £9 billion forward through growth deals, and a great deal has been delivered through those growth deals, and work in all your counties has been absolutely fundamental to that. At the same time, as Kevin just said, the structural funds will continue to be spent under the draft withdrawal agreement that the government has brought forward. Will continue to deliver ERDF and ESF as they are. In the event of a no deal, that funding has been guaranteed and would be spent through domestic means. So the funding carried forward for the next few years is there, but we can design and develop the opportunity through the UK Shared Prosperity Fund to think about funding for places and infrastructure, funding for people, including those a long way from the labour market, in a more consistent way. And that will be critical, and that's work that is going to be fundamental to the spending review when decisions beyond 2020 on funding will need to be made by the government. We are also looking and working in two areas I'll just touch on. I mean, firstly, you will have heard a lot from Sir Ed Lister earlier about the work around housing and infrastructure funding, crucial for housing growth, also crucial to growth, and we're doing a lot of work with Homes England about how can we make sure that the work going on in local industrial strategies, is talking to the work places are doing to think about their housing need and their infrastructure need, so that when we are making decisions about the Housing Infrastructure Fund, we know there is coherent thinking about growth, productivity, employment to support the need for the housing that's Ed and Homes England are seeking to deliver, and that recognises the difference in those markets. And then lastly, I should mention the 675 million from the budget about high streets and heritage and high streets, and how can we support growth in the centre of towns across the country, recognising real shifts that are happening in the market, opportunities to bring people into the centre of towns and build that sort of sustainable growth. And we will be bringing forward the details on how that will work towards the end of the year for conversations into next year, so that money can be spent most effectively. And those resources together will be critical, I think, to support local investment for growth and how we grow counties over the coming few years. So thank you very much.
Okay, I think we have a few minutes for questions. So again, if I can ask if we have any mics, please. There are a number of hands, particularly I think on this side. So we'll start from the back and work our way forward. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Dick Cole from Cornwall. Kevin, you talked about the Shared Prosperity Fund and everyone getting their share, but obviously structural funds at the moment are very much targeted on those less well-off areas with poverty where it's most needed. What assurances have you had from the government that's going to continue and places like Cornwall aren't going to lose out? Because I think from the comments that Simon made about the fund, there was no reference to the present distribution trying to combat poverty, which is pretty important.
Thank you. I'm going to take a few, so if we keep coming forward, there are a few other hands, please. Just take as many as we can in a few minutes, if we can. Thank you.
Hello, this is Hamish McLeod from Mobile UK, which is the trade association for the mobile operators. It's very widely recognised that mobile connectivity is every bit as important to economic growth as fixed broadband, but only about half of LEP's strategic plans even reference that point, let alone treat it with any priority. Is there something fairly straightforward that can be done to redress that?
Thank you. And then I think there's one more, please. Yep. Here.
Yes, I'm from Leicestershire, Byron Roads. We are about to see in the next few years the Development Corporation, which will run HS2, cut a great gorge from north to south through Leicestershire as it ploughs on towards Towton, and threatens to disrupt our economy by messing up all our communications and cross-county traffic and so on. As a county council, we're having to set aside £400,000 a year in order to make sure this development corporation can't completely wreck everything that our successful LEP is trying to do. Have you got some spare money at MHCLG to compensate us?
Thank you. It's very direct. And then I think there's one at the front over here as well. Thank you.
Roy Perry, leader of Hampshire County Council, but also chairman of South East England councils. And whilst we in the South East recognise the great efforts being made by the Northern Powerhouse and the Midlands Engine, we would certainly urge folk in London not to forget what we dub the Super South. We pay more in net terms in tax than any other region, even more than London. And yet the infrastructure investment coming into the South East is lagging behind what is needed. So whilst we, in no sense saying that investment isn't needed in other parts of the country, don't forget the South. And we would also ask, and a question I pose, you've been talking about LEPs, how do we reconcile devolution by giving more power to local communities, and yet more power seems to be going to the LEPs rather than to democratically elected councils?
Thank you very much. A variety of questions there. If you each want to pick up the appropriate ones for yourselves. Kevin, do you want to pick off?
Byron on HS2, all power to elbow. Let's see what Simon says. Mobile, yes, Simon will give you an answer to that. South Eastern on LEPs, totally agree. Simon will answer that. But I was asked a direct question about the UK Prosperity Fund and Structural Funds. So the assurances we've had and have sought and have got is the structural funds, you heard Simon say, will carry on until 2020, because of course the period of the structural funds are 7 years, and the 7 years comes to an end now, or 2020. What's happening right now is the rest of the EU is now debating the next structural funds for the next 7 years. Of course, we won't be part of that. But of course, once we end the transition period, should all that take place, we're still waiting to find out, then we have to find a new mechanism, and the government is talking about the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. So, particularly in Cornwall, I understand absolutely why you asked that question, and you will have that funding up until the 2020. That's why it's important when I said to the government, and I said here, to whom are you consulting with over the Shared Prosperity Fund? It has to be local authorities, and that's why I would urge you to make sure you take part in that consultation. If you have specific points, you can email me, and I will raise those quite faithfully with the Secretary of State, but you must take part in that consultation and talk about the cases in your particular areas. And there will be others, in the northeast particularly as well as in the west. But as for the other questions, Simon's got all the answers.
Okay. Do I need to?
Your mic
or can you hear? Yeah. It's working from the mobile mic. Yeah. I mean, on the Cornwall question, I'll add to what I didn't mention the distribution when I was talking, but of course the current distribution will be recognised in the consultation. Equally, the UK Shared Prosperity Fund will be critical to supporting areas with currently weaker economies to grow in the same way that the European funds have, but we will be wanting to think about that alongside broader growth funding. In terms of mobile connectivity, I mean, sort of simple things that could be done. I mean, I really would encourage you and yours to engage with local enterprise partnerships, or indeed councils around the country around the importance of this. Also, we are working very closely with DCMS, who are getting more and more engaged locally about how they can further critical digital agendas that they're seeking to take forward. On High Speed 2, I mean, we don't have any spare money at all in MHCLG. That much spare money that we do have, we pass on to local authorities as quickly as we possibly can. I would, however, be very, very happy to have a conversation with you or colleagues in Leicester to make sure I understand the points you're making and what you're using the £400,000 for. And in all the conversations I have with High Speed 2 Limited, they are very keen, where they are not sufficiently, to make sure they are engaging with local stakeholders and having the conversation about the issues that you are facing. They won't always be able to address all of those. They have a budget and a timetable and all those sorts of things, but they are very, very keen to be working collaboratively with local councils, with local enterprise partnerships, as I say, with other key stakeholders throughout. And I think the point about the South East is well made. I mean, we are doing lots of work in different parts of the South East. I think the need for infrastructure there is critical. I'm sure Sir Ed Lister talked about the fact that because of the greater housing need and the greater housing unaffordability in the South East, key housing programmes, including the Housing Infrastructure Fund, will be allocated disproportionately, if you like, or proportionately to need, more positive way of putting it, in the greater South East. And the recognition of the need for greater infrastructure is very much there. What the government will have to do, as it determines the next phases of road programmes and rail programmes, is to make choices inside the fiscal envelope that it currently has about the mega projects that are there, whether they're Crossrail 2 or Northern Powerhouse Rail or East-West Rail and any of the rest. So, you know, there are complicated decisions to make. There are important trade-offs, and the way we are wanting to think about it is to make sure there are good economic strategies, both at a a sort of economic travel to work area type, LEP type geography, but then we understand the collaborations for region and super-regional investments, so those decisions are best informed across department.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much again to Kevin and Simon and for all the questions. I think it's a very informative session. Thank you, everyone.